Hi, good morning. I'm Jane Moore, and I'm here with Bill Nichols, who's the park supervisor for Martinez Regional Shoreline. And today we're going to be interviewing him as part of our Martinez Oral History Project. And the other interviewer is KK Bennett, who's a student at the New Leaf Academy in Martinez. And our videographer today is Tom Zamaria. So Bill, thank you so much for participating in this really important project, and we're really excited to hear about your experience in Martinez and Park Service. So if you could just give us your particulars as far as where you live and your family members and things like that, then we'll go into more detail about your job and your work.
Sure. I've been in Martinez since 1953. My family moved here from Port Chicago. And I've been here since, with some brief periods of being gone. I currently live over by Nancy Boyd Park, and I'm married to my wife Linda. Been married since 1978. We have 2 daughters and 1 son and 4 grandkids.
That's great. Wow. Well, it's nice, and your kids grew up here too. So
yeah, they
working
did.
On
yeah.
Second generation and maybe third with some grandkids in the picture too. So that's wonderful. Well, great. I would really like to talk to you a little bit first about growing up in Martinez and what it was like to be able to play and hang out in the parks that you're now responsible for, and you know, the Shoreline Park, what that was like, and what Rankin Park was like, and I know you took the ferry across to Benicia, so a little bit of those background experiences to help us have a contrast as to what it looks like now.
Mm-hmm. It was literally a kid's paradise. I mean, those were the days when kids could be kids without much adult supervision. So it seems to me that we spent entire summers up at Rankin Park. I mean, playing baseball and in the pool and up in the hills, and when I look back on it, Martinez was a real bustling town at that time. These are the days before the bridge, before you could drive to Benicia.
Okay.
You had to come to Martinez to get the ferry.
Right.
So, I mean, it was the destination point. Downtown was very busy. There were 2 movie theaters. And it was just, when I read other people's accounts now, it's almost like growing up in the Midwest or something. It was just a lot of things for kids to do.
A real small town in the middle of the Bay Area,
Yeah.
which it still has that really unique feeling, which is one of the reasons that it's such a great place.
Yeah.
So did you live close to downtown, or were you like a bike ride? Did you ride bikes around to get around, or were you?
We lived in about 6 different places in Martinez, and they were all, the furthest out was Linden Lane, which is, yeah. They were all within easy walk or bike of wherever you wanted to go.
I remember when I interviewed Sheila Greeley, she told us about taking the ferry across to Benicia, and she used to hide out on the ferry and
Yeah.
hope that she didn't get thrown off on the Benicia side. Did you go over there just back and forth on the ferry, or did you go over to Benicia to do something?
No, we would just go over and swim
Oh, okay.
on that side and then come back and swim on this side. Back and forth. I mean, you could ride the ferry for a quarter.
All day long, or just
Is that, yeah,
yeah.
as I recollect, we
That's
could, yeah.
amazing. And what was the waterfront park like? Because that's had a lot. Hasn't that had a lot of landfill put into it?
Yeah.
In areas. So what was it? What was the geographic look of it when you were growing up?
I remember there being a dump down there.
Which part?
And I think it's where the duck pond is now.
Oh.
Because I remember there was an old guy that whoever operated this place, and he had a .22 and he would shoot the seagulls and the rats. But I also remember where our part of the park is now, there were a series of baseball fields.
Oh.
And that's where the Horsemen's Association was. The rodeo grounds was right there.
So when you say our part of the park, you're talking, because later I want to ask you about the jurisdiction of the park, but when you say our part, you mean the East Bay Regional Park side, which is now the horse stable side and the corral side?
It's the regional park side is if you're going down toward the marina.
Yes.
Is on the left.
Okay. So there were baseball fields over there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the other side was more industrial.
Mm-hmm.
There was just a big open dirt field, which at one time had been a plain landing strip.
Oh, wow.
And there were a bunch of industrial type businesses down there also.
Mm-hmm. So the main part of the park that you used to go to was the part that you have jurisdiction over now, which is down where the new marsh area is and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, with the creek, and the creek was the draw.
Of course.
We spent a lot of time in that creek. I mean, fishing and swimming and you name it, we were doing it down there.
What a great place to
Yeah.
grow up. Just amazing the value. So did your career of what you do now kind of happen by chance? Was it a right time, right place kind of thing, or did you actually pursue Park Service as a, did you know at age 16 that this is what you really wanted?
Not at all. I was so undecided that I enlisted in the Marine Corps. and that was a learning, that was a lesson in and of itself. But I was just, when I got employed by the Park District, or I got the opportunity, I was just kind of supporting the family, working for a local landscaper. And I was actually in a ditch down at the waterfront park when the construction companies were putting the turf in.
Oh.
This would have been in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And we had gotten to know the park supervisor at the time for East Bay. And he came by and he dropped an application into the ditch that I was working in, and I was barely able to catch it before it hit the muddy water.
Wow.
And I just put in, and things clicked, and I got hired in 1981.
So he recognized you as somebody who could, I mean, sometimes that's how it happens.
Yeah.
Somebody in your life recognizes your potential, and they hand you an opportunity, and you ran with it.
Right. It was good timing.
Yeah, right time, right place.
Yeah.
That's so much of life. That's great. And how lucky for you to be able to remain in your favorite place.
Yeah.
And be able to work like that. I know that from my experiences down at the waterfront park and in a lot of the parks, you don't see a lot of women as park rangers. And how do you feel about that? And do you think that there needs to be more women, or why is there such a gap in that?
We've had extraordinary women on this staff down here, one of whom is went on to become the head of Berkeley Parks and Recreation.
And she started here.
Sue Ferreira, yeah, she started with us in 1985. And another woman, Annie Campagna, became a supervisor with the Park District. The first woman I mentioned was Sue Ferreira, and Sue went on to become the Berkeley head of the parks. And we also had a woman named Carol Alderdice who was with us for 10 years, who did a lot of good work down there. There's just, I don't know, it seemed like the women actually putting in for the job of park rangers, the numbers are down a little bit. And I don't know the specifics on that, but it seems to me that we used to get more women coming into the system.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that would be a good outreach and encouragement to the high school age, or even at Diablo Valley College, or
Oh, yeah.
where there's the younger population now
Yeah.
that maybe just kind of they're going through the motions, but giving them
Yeah.
an opportunity to consider
Yeah.
new roles that may be really wonderful for them and they hadn't really thought of
Mhm.
before. So,
I did want to mention that our current chief of park operations is a woman, Ann Sheeran. She's a woman who came up through the district, started as a lifeguard, and has been all through park operations and park maintenance, and has been chief of operations for the last 3 years.
so she's chief of East Bay Regional Park Operations, or?
Yeah, she runs the parks basically.
Okay, so she's located out of Oakland.
Yeah.
She might be an interesting person to reach out to
Ah.
do some speaking in front of the student groups,
Yeah.
like KK's class or something like that, if they could get her.
She lives in Port Costa.
Oh, well, how perfect is that? So what some of the changes that you've seen both environmentally and bureaucratically? I know you were talking about the grouping of the parks and how that changed from being, or how has that made a difference in how the parks are now grouped for jurisdiction purposes?
The park district has literally exploded. I mean, growth-wise. When I started here, it was not even half of what it is now.
You mean number of parks?
Number, yeah. It's now 65 parks, 114,000 acres.
Wow.
And back in 1986, just before the big expansion, which was done with the support of the public and the bonds, we've always had great public support, which has allowed the district to go out and buy land. And then for us out here, and when I say out here in the parks, it's a matter of how are we going to keep it secure and maintain it until we can open it up as a park. That's always been the challenge for us. But back then we got a new general manager in named David Pessanon, who replaced Richard Trudeau. And one of the first things Pesson did was do a complete district-wide reorganization, which entailed putting parks which had similar concerns and interests in the same grouping. Prior to that, they had just been in geographical units.
Okay.
Like Martinez was in the same group with Briones, Contra Loma, Black Diamond, Contra Costa Trails.
Contra Costa group.
After '86, we were in the Shoreline unit, which was Hayward Shoreline, Crown Beach, Miller Knox, Point Pinole, parks which all had similar concerns, you know, and focuses.
That makes more sense because you're
Yeah.
managing the same kind of problems
Right.
over a...
And now we're in the midst of another smaller reorganization, which is putting us back into more geographical.
Oh, interesting.
Just Martinez, though.
Okay, why is that?
I think it's just because of the sheer size of what that... I mean, it takes me 2 hours to get to a central location to have a meeting these days.
Oh, I see, sure. Well, that makes it better
Yeah.
for more efficient. You just mentioned the process of buying the land, so you have the voter support, you go out and buy a big piece of property, and then what's the process from once that purchase happens to being able to make it accessible to the public as a park? You know, what's that about?
The public will approve, will give the district to go ahead to go out and buy the land. The district will buy the land under the leadership of our board of directors. And this area, this specific Martinez area, has been extraordinarily rich with land acquisition throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s. The entire Franklin Ridge, a lot of the area around Port Costa and Crockett, Waterbird, all the way out to Bay Point and Big Break out in Oakley, was all done under the leadership of Ted Radke.
Yeah, I'd like you to talk
Yeah.
a little bit more about Ted and his role. It's a perfect opportunity for that because I know he's been the president of the board for a long time, and I know he's been a leader in getting ballots on the initiative and just designing the ballots so that they would be attractive to voters and they'd understand what they were voting on. So if you could talk a little bit about Ted's contributions.
It's difficult to even think about any of this without thinking about Ted because he's been here so long. I mean, he's been on the board of directors since the mid-1970s.
Wow.
He's been doing this forever. And prior to that, he was a city council member with the city of Martinez. And so he's just been there every inch, every step of the way. He's been behind the scenes, never intrusive. I mean, and in the old days, he used to walk around the parks and you wouldn't even know, unless you knew who he was, that he was a member of a member of the board of directors. But he's just always been there for us, very supportive in terms of getting funding and equipment and that type of thing. And the job for us has been to try to do what we do with ever-increasing territory. And in the late 1990s, early 2000s, that meant that the Martinez staff was covering from Crockett to Big Break, 7 or 8 different parks, 7 days a week, in the summer from 7 a.m. to 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
How many staff members are you talking about when you say the Martinez staff?
We had 7 was our high water mark.
That's a huge. I know. I have
Yeah.
seen you driving home down Alhambra at 8 o'clock at night
Yeah.
in your truck. I have seen that. Yeah, it's a lot of hours.
A lot of hours. And we've had great staff members.
Yeah.
People have tended to stay here for a long time. Dedicated park rangers, a lot of whom have gone on to advances within the park district. A couple of park supervisors, and one went on to become the chief of park operations prior to Ann Shear that I was telling you about. So we've been extremely fortunate in that regard.
It's maybe safe to say that this is such a jewel to work here that they want to stay until they see an opportunity to move up the ladder, and you know.
It's just such an interesting place, and interesting in a lot of different ways. I mean, in terms of natural terrain, I mean, you got the turf operation in Martinez. We have fishing piers. You have a couple thousand acres of wildland open space, marsh natural preserves. It's just it's all here. Plus, You get the added bonus of being so close to the cities,
Yes.
of whatever happens in the city also happens in the park.
What do you mean by that?
Have you read Cannery Row by John
Yes,
Stein?
yes.
That's
okay,
what I'm talking
okay,
about.
Right, right.
We have our own version of that,
Uh-huh.
especially here in Martinez.
Right, very true,
Yeah.
very true. So what kind of challenges does that present, that we've got a park area that's got everything going on, from open space hills to, saltwater marsh to, manicured areas, and probably a smaller staff now, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's smaller.
So what kind of challenges does that create for you, and how do you handle that as park supervisor?
It's, I look back and I literally don't know how we did it all these years. Just the people were good. And we had enormous public support every step of the way,
Mm-hmm.
and support from our board of directors.
Right, right.
And when you're in the midst of it, when you're in the fire, you're really not thinking about how the heck am I going to get this done? You're just doing it.
You just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it would be the testament to the team that you don't have to sit there and analyze and come up with a game plan as much as everyone goes out and executes
Right.
their job.
And because we were always moving,
Mhm.
like on a typical Sunday, 3 of us would be on duty, and one of us would go to Martinez, the other one would head to Antioch, and out there, big break, and the other one would go do Carquinez, Port Costa and Crockett, and meet back in about noon, say, and add up what the carnage had been the previous night in terms of vandalism or just problems, and go from there.
And you don't really know what that's going to be until you get out there on the...
No?
So is that part of one of the aspects of the job that you enjoy, is a little bit of the unknown and the instant problem solving that you might have to come across when you get there?
I enjoy coming in, and I expect there's going to be some routine, but there never quite is 100%. There's always something that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be anything from a big incident, a fire or a chemical incident, and something like that, or just vandalism or a character in a park, you know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Have you seen an increase in, especially with with Martinez? I know we have a larger percentage of homeless population, and they always seem to be portrayed in such a negative sense with the community. But is that really the fact with them down at the marina, or are they actually some good stewards and trying to find a place to have a home, albeit without a roof over their head, but yet be good stewards as well?
It varies from, it's an individual thing, and the levels also vary. Back in the 90s, there was something going on with the availability of welfare here and food that made it, I mean, transients were coming in from all over the state on trains. It's much more difficult to do that now, the whole romance of the box cars and riding the rails. They don't do that anymore because they have different types of train setups
Security,
now.
yeah.
But it's an individual thing. It comes and it goes. We have people down there now who local police use as kind of an eyes and ears down there, you know, and 90% of them are fine. I know people, but I do know people who will come into Martinez with their windows rolled up and their doors locked.
Sure.
And we've never found that to be the case at all.
Right. Well, it's with any demographic group, there's a bad apple,
Yeah.
and then there's the people that tend to be good. And I do see a lot of the same people because I go down to the park a lot, and I want to believe at least that those people are the eyes and the ears, and they are taking care of things because they care about it.
And we do establish relationships with them because they're there every day.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. And so there's a real cross usage at the park. Are there any kind of groups that you would like to? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, who are the good stewards? You know, who are the community groups, and who are the people that really tend to step up and help you as community citizens in watching over the park and taking care of it and that kind of thing?
Well, first are the regulars, the people that are down there every day, and there's a group of them, and you know, they're just there every day walking, and they'll tell us, you know, hey, you got a leaking water faucet down here, or there's a dog out in the marsh off leash, or you name it. I mean, they'll bring it to our attention just because they're there and they care.
Right.
And then there's organized groups that actually give us a big help, like Friends of Alhambra Creek has been huge support down there.
Yeah.
And other public groups, the Audubon people. I mean,
Boy Scouts, I think. Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scouts. I mean, then we have Coast Cleanup every year.
Right, right. And I think
Yeah.
it'll be really fantastic if the New Leaf students can start a new partnership with you on a more regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's going to be really wonderful
Mhm.
too,
Because there's been a void, because we lost the Contra Costa County juvenile work crews
which is a real shame.
10 or 15 years ago. We would get them every Sunday to do cleanup projects.
Mhm.
And a park ranger would be with that crew while they were in the park. And we got a chance to teach them tool use and things like pruning trees and
Right.
and it would allow them to develop kind of an ownership of the
Uh-huh.
park.
Uh-huh. Was that because of budget cuts that?
Yeah, the county budget cuts.
Yeah, yeah. That's the way it is with a lot
Yeah.
of things.
And they were extraordinarily helpful. I mean, we had a lot of problems down here for years with flooding.
Uh-huh.
And it was just when you're down there with two park rangers and you're looking at 300 acres which has just been devastated, and you get a 10-person work crew, that's a big deal.
So they would come down and help at the park with
Yeah.
what kind of?
Clean up mud off the trails.
Uh-huh. With just shovels and?
Yeah.
And it would be so great to engage students in that more, because we all know that the physical activity level of the young adults in the country
Yeah.
is not as high as it
It
used
seems to be a little bit electronically,
to be. Yeah.
going in that
Plugged
direction.
in.
But the thing that for the kids is it's very important for them to know that this is not about something that happened years ago. This is right now. I mean, this is their park system. It's right there
Yeah.
for them. It is all of ours to take care of and to watch over.
Right, and as you said earlier, it's really important to get them engaged so that you have a new generation of potential
Yeah.
park service people coming into the system.
Mhm.
Because as people retire and age out, you need to have the new blood. And it'd be nice to have the new people in there while the older workers
Right.
are there to mentor them and
Yeah.
teach them and stuff. And I know that there's a really good relationship with the National Park Service doing that with
Mhm.
New Leaf, so it'd be nice to
Yeah,
move it to East Bay Regional Parks too.
definitely.
Right. One interesting thing about the Shoreline Park is that part of it's governed by the City of Martinez and part of it's governed by East Bay Regional Parks. So how do those two bodies work together, and what's a little bit of the differences in style and approach?
We work closely individually with their park people that are down there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different kind of a philosophy in that Martinez has to deal with all the parks within the city. It's like they have 15 or 16, maybe even more than that, parks within the city that they deal with their staff. Whereas Martinez is one of the parks here, and then we're out to Crockett and Port Costa and out on the other side of Martinez. With the city people, it's a 5-day operation. I think they're 7 to 3:30. So we're there 7 days a week and longer. And we're down there when the public's there. Martinez has always been a blue collar. I like to call it a blue collar park.
Mm-hmm.
They come out in numbers after work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go down there at 7 o'clock on a typical spring or summer night, you know exactly what I'm talking
There's
about.
family barbecues going on.
And bocce and
Bocce,
softball and
yeah.
the marina and all that.
Bike riding.
So in that sense, theirs is a more traditional park operation,
Mm-hmm.
where ours is we're just there more.
So the City of Martinez is actually using their city work crews. It's not the police department obviously the police department would come in if there was a problem, but is it the city working crew that actually maintains the city parks?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
That waterfront park as well as all the other parks within the city.
And at the waterfront park, their jurisdiction is really, I always call it the manicured and the wild side. So the manicured side being the baseball fields, the bocce fields, and the horse stable. Is that the city operated?
Pretty much we retained the horse arena because that was part of the district land when we bought they were just relocated down to the end of Joe DiMaggio Drive.
Right.
Yeah.
So who's in charge of the big, I call them the sludge ponds?
The city.
That's the city, okay. Because that's the unofficial dog park.
I know.
Probably shouldn't mention that.
That's the spot that the city retained that's where they put the dredge spoils
Uh-huh,
when they have to dredge the marina.
okay.
That's the area they retain for that activity.
Okay.
And then we have the marsh that's to the north of that encompasses the whole Shell dock area.
Right.
It's kind of a wild marsh down there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you also have the other side where the new tide waters pools, the spill pools have been built, and the new waterfront, the whole wild side where the
Yeah.
marsh is and everything.
Yeah.
One of the parks that I am really interested in hearing about, and I know you want to talk about, is the one along 680, which when I moved here in 1988 I remember hearing that they were going to put industrial buildings in there, and then there was a big oil spill. And it has turned into just an absolutely beautiful waterfront bird marsh, and it has quite a history as to how that happened. And I think that would be really great if you could tell us about the spill and what happened and how that actually turned into the beautiful wildlife park that it is now.
Sure. That's actually one of the highlights of my career down here. It was on a Sunday, an April Sunday in 1988, and I got a call from my on-duty ranger telling me that people were passing out on the trails from the fumes from an oil spill.
Passing out at which trails? Down at the waterfront?
Yeah, on the Pickleweed Trail, which goes right out by the old schooner.
Uh-huh.
She said people are being overcome by these fumes, and I think this is a huge incident.
Oh my God.
Turned on the radio, and KCBS was reporting a small leak from a Shell facility. So we mobilized, and when I say mobilize, the entire Park District Fire Department. We have our own fire department. And at that time it was about 60 members strong. The entire fire department came down there and went into the bay, into the oil, because that's what we did in those days. This is before the days of the precautions that we take now with picking up oil burrs and that type of thing. And we were able to put protective boom at the entrance to Alhambra Creek and the duck pond inflow and all the little tributaries that flow throughout the marsh. So basically we were able to keep most of the mud out, most of the oil out of the marsh down there. It got the shoreline, it got the marina, it got everything else. But and then for the next week, district people in huge numbers came out and would be out there literally mopping up the oil from the shoreline with pads and booms.
Wow.
Because the shoreline, you can, when you get something like this, the politics kick in. And the cleanup will take place where there's the most political need, if I could put it gently like that.
Certainly, I think you did that very well.
Like on Cosco Busan, you saw the immediate response was to San Francisco and then to Marin.
Right.
So here it was across the bay in Benicia. And then gradually we started getting cleanup help in Martinez.
So the spill stretched all the way across the strait from Benicia to Martinez.
It was reported, I think the initial estimate was, correct me if I'm wrong, was 500 gallons or something like that.
I don't remember the number.
And it went up to being closer to 800,000.
Yeah, 500. It could never have been 500
No.
gallons.
And I don't want to get into the politics of all that. But it was grossly underestimated. But we knew it was much more, and we treated it that way.
Certainly, because you're on the front. So as the oil is coming into the shoreline, so I'm trying to visualize right where the creek opens up onto the waterfront, and you've got the beautiful arch bridge, and that's the whole area that you were trying to protect.
Yeah, and we were able to put boom out to keep the oil outside in the bay. It did get the entire shoreline.
Wow.
And actually, as part of the mitigation, Shell did replace. We used to have a bunch of ugly concrete down there, which kind of arced around to the marina, to the fishing pier.
Okay.
And that was all replaced with nice big rock and clean
that.
rock.
Yeah, I do remember that ugly concrete.
Yeah.
So that whole oil spill in '88, how did that lead to, I guess it's called the Waterbird Park now. Is that the stretch I'm thinking of along 680 at the Marina Vista?
At that time it was called Shell Marsh.
Okay, right.
And even then, and what it is, it's the effluent water from the Mountain View Sanitary District flows underneath the freeway and collects there in that big marsh.
Okay.
And at that time, it was mingling with incoming tidal water from the bay through a series of culverts, and it also had a big upland component, a big wildland area.
Right.
And it was decimated.
By this oil spill.
Because what had happened was a tank drainage valve had failed over in Shell, and it had allowed the entire tank to drain through the system of culverts, and the first stop was the Waterbird Marsh.
And of course nobody could see it coming because it was coming in the culverts underground, right?
Except for a neighboring refinery crew who saw it and reported it to Shell.
Wow.
And whatever happened, happened.
Right.
But that whole area was, when I say decimated, I mean there was not one living thing out there.
Really?
And I'm sure you know about the La Brea tar pits.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people out there in rowboats crying, picking up hundreds and hundreds of dead birds. It was a scene from hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so bad that there was a big press conference out there within a following days, and there was a big Earth First rally out there that was calling for the public hanging of Shell executives. I mean, it was pretty bad. Now, of course, that didn't happen. Things simmered down, and there was a big collective effort by a bunch of agencies who joined together to clean up the marsh and then turn it into a park. And that was Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife, Mountain View Sanitary, East Bay Parks, and a bunch of other groups that kind of shepherded the cleanup. And when I say cleanup, every inch of contaminated soil was taken out of that place.
What did they do with it?
There's these places for hazardous material. A lot of them are down south that they take this stuff to, and it's remediated down there.
So they just took all of that. There were grasses growing and everything?
Everything was contaminated.
Everything
The name of the oil was San Joaquin crude. It was a particularly obnoxious, heavy kind of bunker fuel that had leaked.
How did they cut off so you have on the other side of 680, you have the Shell or the Mountain View water treatment plant. And so they had to shut that down also.
They were able to close culverts.
Close everything off and just isolate the situation.
Yeah.
Totally remove everything, and then let it refill and naturalize.
Yeah, through extraordinary work. I mean,
amazing work.
Yeah, restoration. I mean, biologists and volunteers, you name it, they were out there. And in 2003, I think it was opened as a park. It was opened back up.
So from 1988, it took until 2003.
Yeah.
That's a long
time. Yeah.
But
the birds came back in the meantime.
I bet they did.
For some reason, it's kind of funny because you go out there and you're standing in the parking lot, and your first thought is, you're just hit with this onslaught of industry, the refineries, the noise on 680.
Yeah.
But the birds absolutely love it.
It's a magnet for birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And they're protected out there. It's because of the type of water it is. Humans can't have contact with it. So humans can't go down right. You can get pretty close, but you can't get right up to the marsh. But you can observe it.
What do you mean the type of water it is?
It's treated water. It's from a sanitary district.
Oh, I see. Okay, so maybe that's why the birds like it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess I never realized.
And then for years and years, the other component was missing because during the interim, they discovered that there were all these Superfund sites downstream that the bay water had to pass through to come into Waterbird. Like Ron Palant, that thing was, that all had to be cleaned up and remediated. And finally, I think that's just now happening, is that the water is coming in, and the water is reaching the brackish state that it's supposed to be.
So that park serves as like a big water filter, basically.
Yeah.
And then that water gets processed and naturally filtered and goes back out into the strait.
Yeah, it does.
So it's a wonderful example of how to utilize this big area as a natural water filter, and yet it's a wildlife sanctuary and park too.
Yeah. And if you would have told me in 1988, when we were out there picking up birds, what it would eventually be, there was no way I would have believed it, because it was almost beyond comprehension how bad it was.
So you were actually, you were one of the people that was out there scooping up the dead birds and
Yeah, myself and about 200 other people from the park district. I mean, the park district sent there were office secretaries out here mopping up
Really?
oil.
Wow.
Yeah.
A huge project.
And in those days, we were in the oil, which is not good. I mean,
No.
nowadays you would never even get close to it.
Right.
You would have full protective clothing, but in those days we just did what we could, and
Well, there was such
yeah.
a sense of urgency,
yeah,
and just the horrific vision of this,
Mhm.
that you would just jump in
yeah.
without thinking, and now you wouldn't be doing that, of course.
No, now we have the capability through mitigation from other oil spills. We have boats and other equipment which we can use before the oil gets there to take the same protective measures.
Mm-hmm. So that's been a huge change in how the whole cleanup process in the event of an emergency happens, and
Yeah.
of course it's all a learning experience.
And we're at the point, East Bay Parks is at the point where we can take certain measures by ourselves before the big cleanup companies get involved, because we realize that parks and shoreline are never going to be the number one priority when you have these huge, beaches and marinas and civic developments that are going to get the attention first.
So you have the ability to go ahead and act first.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
so that you can stop something before
Yeah.
it gets really
And our boat is actually part of the mitigation. That boat is 26 years old now. We got it from Shell as mitigation for the
Oh, perfect.
88 spill.
So that's good. And
Yeah.
is it parked down at the marina? So
And it's parked in our yard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're working at the old Department of Defense facility at the end of Carquinez Scenic Drive
Mm-hmm.
now, so we can get down to the marina in 10 minutes
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. Well, you used to be right down at
Yeah.
the marina, right by the
Yeah.
Sportsman's Club.
Yeah.
And then did you move to a bigger, better?
We did, yeah.
Oh, well.
That building at the marina was an old Oakland school building,
Oh, they moved it there?
which was moved there in 1982 because Martinez used to be connected with Brioni's before the reorganization.
Right.
And that was intended to be a storage
Oh, really?
facility. And then after the reorganization, that became our yard for
Mhm.
25 years.
25 years. It's still there because I
Yeah.
walk by it all the time.
Yeah,
And, yeah. Well, you got some better stuff. Is there any current concerns that you have about the health of our parks, or, things that we should be thinking about to, make sure that we're taking care of, or looking at the future of concerns that might be coming down the road?
yeah. There's a couple of huge ones that I'm mindful of.
Please do. Tell us.
The climate change
Yes.
is with us.
Can you talk about how that's impacting?
We had to close 300 feet of our western perimeter trail 2 years ago because of erosion out there.
Where's the Western Perimeter Trail?
It's down by the railroad switchyard,
Okay.
the Pickleweed Trail.
Uh-huh.
We must have lost 20 feet of outward shoreline down there.
Just from erosion? Or?
Erosion, yeah, natural erosion.
And natural erosion, but why is that climate change related?
I'm seeing the tides are bigger than what they're supposed to be.
Uh-huh.
They're bigger.
Washing away the shoreline.
Yeah, and we're also getting a lot of salt.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I know that's a big concern for you, and that's changing the grasses, the trees.
Yeah, it's killing a lot of the people are always asking me, why don't you plant native trees down there? And here's the thing, there are no native trees. That's all mudflats, bay
Right.
mudflats down there. And if you ever saw what was actually in the soil,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be amazed that it looks like it does.
That looks as good as it does?
Yeah, because it's all fill, and it's clay with big timbers and chunks of concrete and asphalt, and yeah, it's just not good. And I think it looks like it does because of the setting. You got the grass and the sky and the water and the hills.
Mhm.
It's hard to go wrong there, really.
Right, that's great elements.
But we're noticing that a lot of the redwood trees that have been planted in the last 10 years that are down on the north end of the park are starting to brown out. And also we're losing turf grass in that area. And a couple of arborists have told me that it looks like salt. And my gut feeling is that the water's getting a lot saltier.
So it's coming in from underneath and going up through the
Yeah,
roots.
it comes in with the tides.
Right.
And and it's just not as it's not as forgiving as it used to be when it was more brackish and more fresh.
So are there trees that could be planted that would
We
salt?
we plant what grows down there through trial and error.
Uh-huh.
And what grows down there are myoperums, which looks like mock orange shrubs,
Uh-huh.
and Casuarina stricta, which is also called beefwood, and it's also called Australian oaks.
Okay.
They're the line of trees on North Court Street. They kind of look like pine trees, but
Yeah.
they're native to Australia and the Pacific. And they grow there. They grow in inhospitable soil.
So
If there was a native that I could grow down there, I mean, I would do it in a heartbeat. That would live.
and the reason that you're thinking that natives wouldn't grow is because of what's actually underneath the ground as fill.
Yeah, and the fact that there weren't trees there originally.
Originally, no.
It was bay mud shoreline. Is
So
what was
that
there.
would be an interesting project for someone to find native trees
Yeah.
that could grow in that environment,
Mhm.
given the what's underneath the ground. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you can look at a park all you want and say, why can't they put
Yeah.
a native tree there?
And-
But it's actually where the roots going into.
And funny story, when they first planned the park and put it in the early 1980s, the predominant tree was the park that all the architects put in California shoreline parks, the Monterey cypress.
Uh-huh.
And we've lost 98% of them,
Interesting.
because of the conditions down there.
Okay, so you're open for any suggestions?
Yeah.
Okay, that could be another good project for, I know that part of one of the New Leaf teams are the Botanical Creek Trail that's been sponsored by the Friends of Alhambra Creek, and there's a real interest in growing the native gardens, plants in the area and making more awareness. So this could be an interesting research
Yeah.
project. Great.
So
What's one of your other concerns?
So the other concern is the one which, as far as I'm concerned, everybody in this town should be their number one concern. The railroad switchyard. The railroad switchyard is a disaster waiting to happen.
For what reason?
There are thousands of gallons of what it is basically is a storage facility for shell oil.
Okay.
And that's where they put all the toxics. And when I say toxic, I'm talking about hydrochloric acid, propane, liquid petroleum products, chlorine. Everything bad you could name is down at that switchyard. And it's not secured in any way, shape, or fashion, other than a couple of signs that say no parking, which we put up.
Mm-hmm.
Not even a gate. Directly upwind of the city, if there was an incident down there, a major release, it would be downtown within a minute, 2 minutes. The incoming emergency response would be from downwind into the switchyard. So that's the only way they could get there. So they'd be overcome. The responding units would be quickly overcome. And I've actually seen Homeland Security people down there, Department of Transportation, who are concerned with the lack of security.
So how does that get corrected with jurisdictions?
Work with the railroad and work with the city.
Is this the switchyard that's down towards Port Costa from?
No, it's the one that's directly next to Martinez, below the cemeteries. It's the one where the trains they're idling all day long.
Right, right.
And
Right
hundreds
below
of
the
gallons of
cemetery.
diesel fumes are being wafted into the city. It's that switchyard.
The one right below the cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't bad enough,
Uh-huh.
the same erosion that's closing park trails
Right.
is now within 20 feet of the railroad tracks on one side, and on the other side, they're getting constant landslides and stuff coming down because when they put the tracks in there in the 1890s, they just cut a sheer cliff off and installed the railroad tracks.
Right.
So,
You've got it coming from both directions, closing in on this very toxic.
yeah.
That's a huge problem.
Oh, yeah,
That
it's
I don't
huge.
think people are.
And there's
aware
been
of.
incidents down there.
Mhm.
We've reported diesel spills down there, which resulted in them shutting. They used to have a refueling facility down there, which got shut down in 2003 because of the amount of toxics that were leaching into the bay. There were a couple of small releases last year in which a couple of railroad employees got overcome by the fumes and had to be transported to the hospital. They've had train derailments down there. An Amtrak train got stuck because it got impacted a freight train. Nobody was hurt, but they just got stuck together going in opposite directions.
They go right past each other there.
Yeah.
Right.
See, it's a concern.
I'd say it's a huge concern.
And the fact that it's not, I mean, I'm not talking out of school. There is no, we could drive down there right now, drive to the end, as far as we could go and start a bonfire next to the tankers and go fishing.
Let's not give anyone any ideas. Yeah, that's a huge concern. Yet another good reason to get people involved, especially the young people involved. And just anyone who's realizes that this is a disaster waiting to happen.
It's one of the, during my career, I've seen most of the industry disappear from between Port Costa and Martinez along the shoreline.
Right.
There was a big refinery above Port Costa which was cleaned up and taken out of there in the 1980s. The brickyard is closed down.
Right.
That's park property now.
Right.
And some other ones. And the last remaining area before you get to Martinez itself is the railroad switchyard.
Maybe not the most appropriate location for what's going on there. Somehow it needs to be secured.
If you can give the type of post 9/11 security which Shell has. I mean, it's almost funny, but it's tragic at the same time.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't necessarily need to be removed. It just needs to be secured first,
Right.
foremost, which doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to do. Wow. Well, that is a big concern. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Sure, and there's going to be a series of public meetings, by the way.
Oh, are there really?
Yeah, February 26th at the Veterans Hall.
Okay, about that very
About
issue?
about the problem of there's increasing numbers of trains carrying oil that are exploding and decimating towns in Canada and the United States.
Who's sponsoring the meeting?
I'm not sure who. I think the Sierra Club is one of the sponsors.
Okay. Well, that would be good to know more about. That's really great information. I'm wondering, do you have any closing words of wisdom that you'd like to share, especially given the importance of this being something that's a student collaboration with the Oral History Project? And I did not ask you that. The importance of oral history and how can we use gathering this type of a format and use this to educate and inspire the public and students also?
Well, I think there was a time when this area was I just don't think that people get the impact of what we have here. What Martinez was back in the last century, prior to the white settlement. That I think this place was like a paradise. It was, I mean, all the creeks were flowing into here. You've seen the pictures of north of the John Muir House, where it was nothing but orchards.
Yeah.
And what I always tell school groups that come down here, I mention 5 or 6 names, just to get their attention. John Muir, Joseph Walker, Jack London, Ulysses Grant, Joe DiMaggio, and then you throw in Frank Norris, and we all struggle with Frank Norris in our English classes in college. He wrote The Octopus about the California grain industry in the last century, and the final scene takes place in Port Costa. London was writing about the oyster pirates out here. Muir was here. Joseph Walker was buried here. The premier mountain man of all of them, in my opinion. Kit Carson, Jedediah Smith. U.S. Grant was stationed at the Benicia Arsenal prior to the Civil War.
I didn't know that.
All right here. So you have that culturally. And then you have this vast watershed out there where all the waters are flowing down, all that power from the Sierra and meeting the Pacific right here. And I don't get the feeling that many people are aware of having that presence in their daily lives here. So that's the message I would want to pass on to to the kids, and just to let them know that it's not a thing of the past. It's a thing of right now and the future, and it's for them to do with, to get involved with, and to save it and to preserve it.
And it's their responsibility.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful place to be able to continue to improve on and you know,
Yeah.
carry this legacy of the history that you just mentioned, because the Native Americans were here.
And they were here.
Yeah, they were.
When I was a kid, I mean, we used to play, like I was telling you about growing up here. And usually it was Italians would tell us, you kids don't stay up in those hills past dark because the ghosts of the Indians will get you up there. And sure enough, when we were putting in some of the staging areas, we found Indian artifacts. And there was a good-sized seasonal village in the Rankin Park area for hundreds of years. And if you take away the eucalyptus trees now, if you're up there on the hills and you look, you just get it. Fresh water, animals, birds, everything was there.
The perfect storm, in
Yeah.
a good way, of all the natural pieces coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's really been interesting and enlightening, and I think really it'll be of great value for anyone who watches this interview to understand not only your role in this community, but also, you know, your work and the importance of good stewardship, and in that there's more work to do, and you know, it's a wonderful place to be a part of.
Sure. There's been many days when, especially the early days, when it didn't feel like a job at all.
I bet.
And there's nothing more gratifying than closing. We close Carquinez Scenic Drive at night, and knowing that whole corridor is protected for the night. I mean, literally, that's symbolic of what we do.
It's like putting your child to bed.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is. Really nice. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
All right. That was great.
So if a student wants to get involved with the cleanup and everything, how would they do that?
Just contact the Park District. And the website is www.ebrparks.org. And that connects you to the headquarters, and tell them where you want to work, like Martinez, Briones, Black Diamond, any of the parks, and they will put you in touch or give you a contact number for the park staff, park supervisor.
All right.
Now,
So how did you get involved in the shoreline cleanups, and why did you?
We start the day with cleanup, but the big cleanups, the big shoreline cleanup started in the mid-1980s with the Coastal Cleanup Project, which is a nationwide beach and shoreline cleanup effort.
What's your daily routine?
Daily, we start in a central office, and then we go out and do all the parks that we're responsible for. And with us, that's 4 big parks. And we start with cleanup, and we always start with the restrooms, the play areas, and then we go down to the duck pond. Those are the 3 priorities with us.
What was the worst thing that you have ever found?
The worst, God, there's been a lot. We had to stop a coast cleanup, I think about 1990, 91, because somebody found a bunch of dumped chemicals. And during the same cleanup, they found 7 bags of stolen U.S. mail.
Wow.
So we had to put the whole cleanup on hold while the FBI got involved with trying to figure out where the mail came from.
And what about the animals? Do you take care of them?
To the extent that we can, we do. Yeah. If we can get them to Lindsay Museum, we'll do that. If they're injured and they're wild, if they're domestic, we'll try to get them back to their owners the best way that we can.
What do you do with the garbage that you find?
The garbage that we find, we put in dumpsters, and it's hauled to the waste management, just like household garbage, only on a bigger scale. And we do recycle.